Good morning, students. Today we'll discuss about the immune system. Immune system protects the body from various pathogens like microbes, bacteria, viruses. It protects the body from the dead cells, the dying out cells, as well as it destroys the abnormal cells. The immune system has three lines of defense against the antigen. First line of defense, second line of defense, and third line of defense. These defense, they can be physical or chemical barrier. They can be non-specific. They can be specific. Now, first of all, we'll talk about the physical and the chemical barriers which are there in the immune system. These two, they constitute the innate immunity. Innate means by birth. So, physical barriers, they include the skin. Skin is the jack of all trades. It protects the body against the pathogen. It will not allow the pathogen to enter into the body. Then we have got the tear glands, the lacrimal glands, which protects the eyes from the infections. Then in the ear, we have got the ceruminous gland, which produces wax or cerumen, and the dust particles as well as the bacteria, they are trapped by them. Then in the case of nose, we have got the filters, that is the hairs they are present. The mucus is secreted by the nose, and as a result of which the dust particles as well as the bacteria, they are trapped by them. Then coming to the mouth, in the mouth we have got the saliva produced by the salivary glands. These salivary glands, they produces huge amount of saliva containing the mucus and the enzyme known as lysozyme, which kills the bacteria. Then in the stomach, we have got the production of HCl. This HCl, it creates 2pH, which will not allow the bacteria to grow or develop. So the various enzymes which are produced by the gastric juices, the intestinal juices, they will act upon the bacteria and they will kill them. So we can say that the chemical barriers in the form of lysozyme, chemical barrier in the form of gastric juices, chemical barrier in the form of mucus, they will protect the body from various infections. The non-specific resistance is also known as the innate immunity. Non-specific means any type of bacteria or virus, when it enters into the body first of all reacts to it with the help of the phagocytes. The phagocytic cells, they will help in performing two types of function. Number one, they will fight, they will kill the pathogen and consume it. Second, the dead and decaying cells, they are removed by the phagocytes. So phagocytes, they will attract the microbes. The microbes, it will enter into the phagocyte as a phagosome. The lysosome, it will bind with the phagosome to form the digestive vacuole, where various types of digestive enzymes, they are poured on it and it is digested, and the useful components, they will enter into the cell, whereas the non-digestible components, they are collected in the form of the residual body and thrown out from the cell in the form of exocytosis. So phagocytes, they are the ultimate warriors of the body and they constitute the second line of defense. Then the phagocytes, they basically are formed by the neutrophils as well as the monocytes. Whenever the neutrophils and monocytes they are activated, they will be leading to the formation of phagocytes. The phagocytes they are present throughout the body, and these phagocytes they are also stimulated by the cytokines which are produced by the body. The next second line of defense is the interferons. Interferons, they are the antiviral proteins which are produced by the dying cell. That is, when the virus it attacks the cell, that cell is unable to cope up with that very virus. Before dying, that cell it will produce a protein which is known as interferon, and it releases this protein to the surrounding cells. These interferons they will enter into the surrounding cell and they will protect those surrounding cells from the attack of the viruses. So the interferons they are playing a very important role as the second line of defense or non-specific resistance. Then next is the inflammation. Inflammation, it is a localized response to any sort of damage or injury. So basically the inflammation responses they include number one, the redness, then the swelling, then pain and tenderness. So whenever there is any injury in the body, maybe a cut, maybe some disaster, maybe some fallout, what happens? First of all, that area it will become inflamed. That inflamed means the swelling is there, then redness is there, then heat production it is also there. Initially the heat production is localized. Later on, if the injury is not healed, then the fever it is there inside the organism. So inflammatory responses they are also responsible, they are also the innate immunity inside the body. The next type of innate immunity is the fever. Normally we think that fever is not good, but what happens if the body it shows fever? It means that the body it is responding to the microbes. That is, the fever it is a sign, it is a signal for the body which is responding to the pathogen. So fever can be localized, fever can be systemic. So in this way we can see the phagocytosis is there. That is, the phagocyte it enters into the pathogen, it enters into the body, it will form the phagosome. The phagosome joins with the lysosome and phagosome they will form the digestive vacuole where the enzymes they are poured on this phagosome, and then the digestible materials, the components, they are absorbed by the cell, and the rest will form the residual body, and the residual body is thrown out by exocytosis from the cell. So in this way the phagocytosis is there. Then the second line of defense it is formed by the cells, blood cells, the WBCs. Basically the WBCs they are of two types, granulocytes and agranulocytes. The granulocytes they include neutrophil, eosinophils and basophils. The neutrophils basically they are responsible for phagocytosis as I have mentioned earlier. So the neutrophils they are having many lobed nucleus and they are neutral, whereas eosinophils they are having the acidic granules and they are responsible for breaking the walls of the parasite. So whenever the parasitic or helminthes infection is there, the number of eosinophils it is increased. These will collect around the parasites and they will secrete the secretions and creates hole in the body of the pathogen and the pathogen dies. Then is the basophils. The basophils they are having the basophilic granules, that is the basic granules, and their nucleus is S-shaped. they produces three important components. Number one is histamine, number two is heparin, and number three is serotonin. And it is responsible for the allergic inflammatory reactions. So the second line of defense, basically, it includes the inflammatory response, as I've told you. That is, it leads to redness, swelling, warmth, and pain, right? And the patients, they will, wherever the second line of defense, it accelerates, there what happens, the mast cells, they will release the histamine, that under the influence of this histamine, the blood vessels, they dilate, they increase the blood flow, and more of WBCs, they will move around the site of injury. That increases the volume and the tenderness is there. The area, it becomes bit harder, reddish, warmth, pain, it is there because of this. Interferon we have discussed. They are the antiviral proteins which are produced by the dying cell in response of some virus to protect the surrounding cells from that very virus. Fever, again we have discussed. Two types of fever is there. One is localized, second is the systemic fever. Then coming to the third line of defense, that is the specific resistance. It is also known as acquired immunity. This immunity, it is because of the lymphocytes. So when we talk about the three lines of defense, we say the first line of defense is formed by the skin, the lacrimal gland, the ceruminous gland, the saliva, the mucous cells, the HCl. They'll all form the first line of defense. The second line of defense is formed by the blood cells, that is the WBCs, then the interferons, then the fever, then the inflammatory responses. The third line of defense is very specific, and it is formed by the lymphocytes. So we have got two types of lymphocytes. One is the B cells, another is the T cells. So B cells, they are responsible for the formation of the antibodies, whereas the T cells, they will fight directly with the pathogens. So B cells, they are also known as the humoral immunity, whereas the T cells, they are responsible for cell-mediated immunity. So the B cells, how the B cells, they are responsible for causing the immunity, that is, these lymphocytes, B cells, they will attach themselves with the pathogen, that is the bacteria directly binds with the B cell. B cell is stimulated, it will read that very bacteria, and against that very bacteria it will produce the antibodies. They release the antibody into the serum or the plasma, and then the antibodies, they will trap, they will either agglutinate, they will either precipitate or coagulate these pathogens and lead to the death of the pathogen. So in this way, the antibody, by roaming through the plasma, that leads to the death of the pathogen. Now coming to the T cell or the cell mediated immunity. In the case of cell mediated immunity or the T cell immunity, the T cell directly cannot bind with the pathogens. So they need something to present the antigen, that is, they require some antigen presenting cell, that is, that will present the antigen to the T cell. Only then the T cell can become active and can kill the pathogen. So T cell activity, it is because of the antigen presenting cell. T cells, they are also known as T helper cells, then they are known as T killer cells, then T memory cells. So T helper cells, they are the one which are responsible for producing the cytokines and ultimately motivating the B cells as well as the other components, whereas the cytotoxic or T cells, they are also known as the killer cells. They will bind with the antigen presenting cell APC, and ultimately they will lead to the production of chemicals which are known as porins, and these porins, they will create pores in the body of the APC and ultimately leads to the death of the pathogens. They will lead to the lysis of the pathogen. So in this diagram, you can well see that this is the antigen presenting cell. Now antigen presenting cell is that very cell where the pathogen has invaded, but that cell is unable to kill that very pathogen. That antigen, it will be processed. The processed part, it will be represented over the cell in the form of MHC molecule. That is, MHC particles, they are present on each and every cell. These MHC, they will have the fragments of the antigen over it. The cell which are having the MHC molecule, they can only bind with the T cell, right? So MHC molecules, they are having the fragments of the pathogen, not the whole of the pathogen, only the fragment of the pathogen that will bind with the T cell. So helper T cell, it can bind with the MHC. So basically MHC, they are of two types, MHC class 1 and MHC class 2. MHC class 2 binds with the helper T cell, whereas MHC class 1 binds with the cytotoxic T cell. So the killer T cell, they are bind with the MHC class 1, and the helper T cell, they'll bind with the MHC class 2, right? So MHC class 2, when bind with the helper T cell, they will either induce the B cells through the production of cytokines, that is, they activate the B cells so that the more and more of antibodies they are produced and the pathogen is killed. Secondly, they will stimulate the cytotoxic T cell to kill the pathogen infected cells. So helper T cell function is only to enhance the work of the immunity, whereas the killer T cells, they will directly kill the pathogen. So T cells, they are the most important cells which will attack the pathogen directly and lead to the lysis of the antigen presenting cell, whereas the B cells, they are responsible for killing the pathogen through the production of the antibodies. The antibodies, they are also known as immunoglobulins. The immunoglobulins, they are of 5 different types, that is immunoglobulin A, then immunoglobulin M, G, E and D. They are produced under different influences and ultimately they are responsible for removing the pathogen from the body. So this is the structure of antibody. It is Y-shaped structure having two important chains. One is long chain, second is short chains. It has got site for antigen binding and a site for binding with the cell. So this is antibody. So basic role of antibody is, it is responsible for precipitating the antigen. It is responsible for agglutinating the antigen, neutralizing the antigen, as well as activating the complement system, ultimately leading to the phagocytosis and its removal from the body. So in this diagram, you can see all the 4 processes, that is the neutralization, agglutination, precipitation, complement fixation, and these are responsible for showing the phagocytosis, whereas the lysis is there through the complement fixation. So in this way the immune system, it works, right? So 3 major types of cells. Cytotoxic cells, now it's very clear to all of you, that is cytotoxic T cells, they will attack only the antigen presenting cell, which is having MHC molecule with the processed pathogen, right? So cytotoxic T cells can bind with MHC class 1 molecule only, and it causes the lysis through the production of porins. Helper T cells, they are the one which are responsible for production of interleukins only. They will bind with the antigen presenting cell again with MHC molecule which the MHC class 2 molecule, and they are responsible for stimulating the B cells or the T cell for activating their function. And then the memory T cells, they are those which are responsible for memorizing the antigen, and ultimately they are the one which are responsible for producing the or activating the T cells, B cells whenever again after some time the infection is repeated in the body. So they are the memory T cells. So helper T cells, they are responsible for producing the cytokine. So to memorize, to repeat, that immune system has 3 lines of defense: first line, second line, third line. First line is with the help of skin, mucous membrane and secretions from the skin as well as the mucous membrane. Second line of defense is with the help of phagocytic cells, the NK cells, the natural killer cells, the anti-viral proteins which are produced in the form of interferons, and the inflammatory responses as well as the fever. Whereas the specific immune response, it is with the help of lymphocytes, that B cells as well as the T cells. B cells, they will act with the help of the production of antibodies, whereas the T cells, they'll bind with the antigen presenting cell and are responsible for killing the pathogen. So in this way the immune system, it works. I hope the concept is clear to all of you. Thank you.